Hello and welcome to Creative Vitality Jam Sessions. Here we have intimate conversations with extraordinary dance and theater artists about reimagining creativity and supporting and building community. CVJS and I walk in solidarity and as allies for equality, justice, and respect. Black Lives Matter. Let's stay in motion to bring change. And one more note, today is our last session for a while. We'll announce when we come back. I'm Helen Pickett, and today's guest is the remarkable, generous Jeff Beal, award-winning composer for stage and film. Jeff and I have known each other since 2016. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, welcome, Helen. So great to see you.
You too. I always say these sessions are just a great excuse to see friends and sit down and talk and have a coffee.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
Or yeah. For you and I, we met the first time at Kelly and Ping in Soho. Remember that great
I sure do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it still? I hope it's still there.
I don't think so. I have to check. I hope it is too. But yeah. Well, I'm thrilled to have you here, and I'm so happy that you joined us. This is going to be Creative Vitality Jam Sessions, last session for a while. So I'm really, really happy you're with us today. I always start this with everyone. What part of the world are you in?
I am in New York City, Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Oh man, I'm so jealous. I love that city so much.
It's great to be here, and you're part of the reason we came back here from Los Angeles. I mean, I would say there were some family reasons, but you know, all of the artists I met here over the last 5-6 years when I started to re-engage writing concert music, ballets, you know, all these sort of things. I felt a real pull here, and I love this community and your world, especially the dance world. You know, this is ground zero for, certainly for the American dance choreographer community.
Yeah, so true. Right at your fingertips, everything. I love the, you know, step out of your door and you can experience art part of New York City.
Oh, it's amazing. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. We're right next to Riverside Park, and there's many ways to get from the park down to the water view. And there's one place we found that my wife said she felt a little scary, like there could be some, you know, people lurking there. And so it was sunny out. Said, let's go this way. Let's just try it one more time. So we went down there. And the thing is, before you get to the park, there's this big circular kind of big concrete place. And that was like the scary part. So we see like these two ladies with this gorgeous dog. And then we heard music. And there was some a cappella singers singing like madrigals over, because the reverb is great. And we just kind of looked at each other and said, yep, this is New York City, you know, but it's typical, it's true. You know, it's a very, you know, and being a Californian, this idea, and this idea of a communal shared resource of a city is so magical and beautiful to me again. I mean, you know, we started out here many years ago, early in the like mid to late 80s, you know, but it was a different reality because of where we were in our journey. But and having been away from it so long, there's some art really feeds on community. It feeds on connections, interactions, collaborations, and those are so much more fluid when you're in a great city like we are now.
Yes, I agree with everything you're saying, and something else just came up, that it is that community. People who have not lived in New York don't understand how tightly knit all of the art communities, artists in general are. And, you know, like New Orleans, you know, they say every waiter is a musician in New Orleans. Well, you know, every waiter, it is in every root, in every branch in the city art. And I think that is talking about connecting. It's tangible. These connections are tangible. And I think living in a place like that makes you wake up in a different way. It's almost like you know that you're in a soft foundational bed. I don't know how to describe it, but I know
Oh,
exactly.
you said it beautifully. Yeah. And I get I'm a little bit of a vampire in terms of loving to like suck the life out of wherever I am geographically. And so for me, this idea of the environment affecting you is so, and yeah, this is, you go out and every day's an adventure, just walking down the street,
And I had I still have them, the memberships to MoMA and to the Met, and would do just regular trips to multiple museums every month, just in to get fed in that way by color or form or architecture. And oh my gosh, okay, this is not an interview or a session about New York City, although we both love it. I will move on.
Okay. If you don't want to, Zabar's is right down the street. I'd grab some bagels and get on a train down to Philly, like probably in a couple hours.
I'm here. Maybe I'll come to New York. That's what I need.
All right.
So, Jeff, actually, I want to start with a quote from Stephen Schneider of the New York Times. He wrote, "The richness of Beal's musical thinking. His compositions often capture the liveliness and unpredictability of the best improvisation." We've already mentioned it, but you and I really bonded in part because of our mutual love of improvisation, and not just our love, the deep trust we have in that as not just a jumping off point, but really, again, using the word foundation for art. It's a place where we both love to swim, right? So
yes.
This beginning part of the next question, it comes back to that quote. But so you have received 19 Primetime Emmy nominations and have won 5 statues for your music, including Netflix House of Cards, USA Network's Monk, and HBO's Rome and Carnivale. They're all amazing series in their own right. And the music, it's like, I went back and listened to a bit of these themes, and once again, you fall right into, I closed my eyes and stopped watching and just listened, because you do fall into the mood of what's happening. And like you said, geographically. So wonderfully atmospheric, like paint, like you're in it immediately, this atmosphere that you bring. Your first critical notice came for your score to Ed Harris's theatrical release of Pollock. Another artist kind of akin to what we're talking about. Yeah. What a great film, a wonderful artist to create music with. And I mean Pollock's work as inspiration. As a matter of fact, you include this Pollock quote in your material: "Painting is self-discovery. Every good artist paints what he is." Going back to the New York Times quote, "You started as a jazz trumpeter, and improvisation is extremely close to your heart. This project must have felt like home to you in a way. How did you approach the score? What were your easier points and your more challenging points of access? Other than the trumpet being that place of improvisation, do other instruments call you in that same way? And for this film, did you start with improvisation?" I can repeat them. I know it's several.
No, it's good. I think I've got the gist. The circumstances were interesting because I was actually the third composer Ed hired on the movie. And how lucky was I to get this opportunity? I mean, that film, if I can manage an alternate universe. If I had not done the film, my life might have turned out completely differently, because at the time I did it, it was a little indie movie, but really, really got noticed. But by the time I met with Ed, he had tried some things, which he's a first-time director, although a incredible, brilliant actor, and he invested so much energy into this film, especially of all his films. But he had a sense of what he heard in my music and what the film needed, and it was interesting because I think the thing I went over his house for what I thought was going to be just an interview, basically a job interview, and we sort of hit it off, and we talked, and we ended up going to his studio and basically spotting the film. Like, we'll spend several hours there going through the movie, and he's like, "Okay, you get to work." And at this time, it was, I think, maybe August or July. He needed to get the film out. He wanted to get out in the fall. So there was a couple pieces of mine he played that really spoke to him. One was a solo piano piece, which was very useful template for some of the music I did for the Lee Krasner, Ed Jackson Pollock sort of tortured emotional journey. You could call it a romance of sorts. It was definitely was a love story, but also the painting part was fascinating because you look at a Pollock and you think it's simply just random, pure improvisation. And what Ed told me, and I see you shaking your head, which is yes, you were correct. There's so much design that goes into that. Yes, maybe the design is discovered as he does it, but you stand in front of those canvases and it's incredible, just the rhythm and the relationships that exist. And what he realized from some of this from past experiments with music was that it did not want to be purely aleatoric, improvised. It actually wanted to have a structure to it. But within that context, getting back to the quote you read, and it's so hysterical because that was written like so early in my career, but he kind of like nailed me. Like he just like he nailed it, you know, and I didn't even know that's who I was. Oh yeah, I guess that's who I am, but it's because it's, you know, it's like breathing when you just do what you do, you know. But there was and he didn't have a lot of temp music in the film, which is, you know, if you're not a filmmaker, temp music is what an editor will put in before you write the score, just to kind of get the scene working and to give the viewer an idea of what it would sound like with music. It can actually sometimes be the bane of a film composer's existence. But there was one little piece of temp music in one of the painting scenes, and it just had this sort of fiddle, but it was sort of rhythmic and it had a vibe to it. And we both sort of looked at each other and was like, that's kind of cool, there's something there, you know. And it was definitely, because it was sounded more like a fiddle and less like a violin, this idea of Americana, folky kind of sound was born. Ed very specifically talked to me about, he said, I think it's been a long time ago, he said, I hear structure in your music, I hear design, that's important for the film, I want that. So there were a lot of things that didn't work, and I'll get to that in a second, but I'll start with what did work, because the way how you find your way in is how you crack the whole thing. I'm sure you feel the same way when you're trying to develop a dance. You're like, the successes is what you build on. The failures, you can say, okay, I failed, let's try again, right? You know, take another swing. But the success was, in terms of that first batch of cues I wrote for him, was the first big painting montage when he paints this mural for his wife, Amy Madigan's character, Peggy Guggenheim. And it's this ballet. It really is a ballet. I mean, we talked about it like a ballet. It's a ballet of movement, because he has this, there's a long pregnant pause, puts down a cigarette, and he goes and just paints this amazing mural. And I developed, and it was totally, I improvise as I compose. I mean, the two are like the same thing, you know what I mean? So I don't sit and like design a matrix and then like just fill in the dots. It's like brick by brick, I just try an idea. And I got this little string thing going. And within that seed was really kind of unlocked a lot of things that became the score. One was minimalism. The other was repetition. Another was the time signature, because it was in 7/4, so it was like which is a long 7, okay? But the fun thing is, if you're a math music geek, it's also 7 inside of 7, so you can also think of it as so 2 sets of 2s, 1 set of 3. And that piece I wrote for that scene became this sort of hybrid. Wasn't really a fugue, but it was a little bit of a fugue, a faux fugue, but this kind of this idea of process. And I guess for me, you know, some characters are hard to crack. There were certain aspects of Pollock's life which are harder for me to crack. Probably the darker parts, like the alcoholism and the depression, were trickier. But the artist thing, like, oh, I understand that. I know that feels like, because to me, when I'm creating, you get lost in it. And there is a sort of manic energy, which is fun. And you shut off the inner critic and you just go. Yeah. And it's also, I love layers. I love layers of music. I see a lot of it in your work too. And so the idea of building up layer by layer, evolution. And then also, of course, with any film, really having the film feel like a layer of choreography that's with the film. That was really how I find my way in. The harder part was actually the beginning of the movie, the exposition. You know, there's this long shot of Ed Harris looking at Marcia Gay Harden. It's kind of a flash forward in the movie. and it's a gallery show at the end of his career, and it's sort of at the height of his success. The flash bulbs are going off, and he's, you know, he's like on the top of the world, right? He's like winning the Oscar, you know. But the script says Pollock and Krasner exchange these looks of unbelievable pain and angst, and so and it's a slow motion tracking shot. And so the first time I wrote the music, I looked at the scene and thought, well, this is complicated, a little angsty. So I wrote this much slower, introspective, complicated thing. And Ed looked at me and said, that's pretty good, but I don't know if I want to start this film out as like the tortured, here comes the story of the tortured artist, right? So very, very smart filmmaking decision. And also he had that visually. So what he kept on, he said, no, it was almost like he pushed me. He's like, no, we need an overture. Like we need an overture to this guy that tells you he conquered. He, you know, like he does what few painters do, like kind of reinvent a whole world. And so long story short, but stealing from some of the later things I was developing in the painting music, I sort of pulled that forward and started writing to that scene. And that was what became the same theme, the theme for the beginning of the movie. But it was a much longer, it was a little more, there was a few more U-turns and foul balls to get there.
Yeah. Wow, it sounds fascinating. I do want to get an answer on this though. I know trumpet is the place where you, and I'm going to get into that in a minute, actually really soon, but are there any other specific instruments that call you as far as improvisation?
Yeah, I mean, I love playing the trumpet. Sadly, I don't write on the trumpet a lot that much because it means throwing up a microphone, and also it's a monophonic instrument. So I do a lot of my improvising at the piano. But I will say, I will tell you two examples of when it was real, when I really have done this, and one that involves a trumpet, which will be a fun story. Maybe I'll start with that one because this has never happened to me before. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, but I'm starting a new movie for director-writer Rodrigo Garcia, and it stars Ethan Hawke as his character was a trumpet player. And so one of the climactic scenes, Ethan's characters, I don't want to give away the story, but he plays the trumpet in the scene. And so I haven't written a note of music for the score, but because Ethan needs to learn the fingers for what this is going to be, I recorded that piece for the film as an improvisation. It was actually the first music I recorded in this room, which feels already, it like kind of feels kind of magical to me. But that was so much fun because, yeah, I mean, you get to a certain age and, you know, it's that gateway drug that gets you into being a music maker. It's like, it's always with you. I mean, I remember being in middle school, Helen, when I first started like improvising in the jazz band, I was like, what was that? Was fun, you know. It was like I was like a kid in a candy store, and I think what it is about improv. And so, you know, the other part of this was, I guess, was going to say was when I did Rome for HBO, because it was such a gritty, visceral show. I could not go to my normal go-tos, which is usually triggering samples from a keyboard. Nothing felt authentic to me. So at that point, I collected a lot of other stuff, which is over there in a cabinet. But I got all these recorders and dudukes and hand drums. And so a lot of times now when I'm doing a score, I love just picking up an instrument and playing something. If I can make a noise on it, I'll often try to use it. So
that's wonderful. If I can make a noise on it. I also wanted to say, you know, Ethan's in New York. So, you know, maybe that, you know, he might be coming to your studio to get some lessons.
That would be fun. That would be fun. Yeah, I think he was somewhere in Eastern Europe when the emails crossed. But I'm hoping to be on set when he does it, because it's really cool. And I don't know if people that he did a wonderful job in a movie about Chet Baker several years ago. Of course, I can't remember the name of the title of it, but a wonderful biography of sort of the end of Chet Baker's life. And so he has a real affection for the instrument, which is pretty cool.
The funny thing is too, this is just a tiny bit tangential, but you know, just watching Ethan Hawke's career over the years, purely as a spectator, I feel like he might also have a heart that lives somewhere in improv, or at least is open to the idea of that kind of, that kind of art. But I do want to say, you know, just to let, you know, our watchers also just to iterate, we are both talking about, and I know we both believe this because we've talked about it, improv is born out of our keen knowledge of our art form. I mean, there's a lot of technique, and
Yes.
I do maintain, and I've had really great conversations about this, but that I think the most intricate, spontaneous, just improv comes from that place of knowing first, right?
Can't agree more. I mean, certainly learning play to jazz is that you learn, you have to internalize so much grammar. It's a language.
Exactly.
You have to know that language so well that you can then, musically speaking, stand up and speak it off the cuff and know the language. And I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah.
It's so true, Helen. And it's really fascinating because there's so much power there, but there's also a danger to I wouldn't say abuse it, but to not do it well because you just haven't done the homework, you know?
Yes, exactly.
I will say, it's been interesting what you said about actors, because it's funny, I've been really lucky to work with Ed on 2 movies. I worked with Al Pacino on a documentary, and I've worked with a lot of actor directors, and they are so much fun. And most of them, I would say, have been sort of, I think most of the modern acting school, especially for American actors, is really on sort of the method acting or actor studio kind of model. I mean, I'm sure certainly all have their own way in, but I enjoy that about actors. I mean, I enjoy watching a performance where, man, I have no idea where they're going next. And I think in their way, they may be calculated, but they've learned how to make the spontaneous really a part of what they're doing.
Because
you know, there was a really
it's life.
Yes,
and that's
exactly.
That's why we're connected.
Yeah.
Because that spontaneity is an inherent, integral part of, just think of every step you're taking. You don't know how it's going to fall. You've done it forever, but how will that foot fall? And so I think sometimes that gets kind of, I think that chasm gets bigger when people say, well, it's technique and spontaneity. But the truth is that change is only the ever constant in life. And getting comfortable with that makes you say, so let's learn the technique so I can actually, you know, quote unquote, roll with the punches, whatever's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you know that very well.
No, that's so true. I remember one story you were telling me early on when we started working together. It was about how professional dancers they're really used to touching each other. So there's nothing special about it as if we touch somebody that's not, you know, you're a partner or somebody. Even that, you know, there's an energy that happens when 2 people touch. And so you worked very hard in your ballets where that was supposed to be, where the touching was a big part of the storytelling, to make that feel real for the performers and obviously by extension to the audience. That was such a really special observation you had, and I've loved watching you in the studio because I just see the process that you have with dancers, and it's really fascinating.
Thank you. Well, we're kind of kindred spirits there. I'm because I hear it in your music, and I see the way you also, your music's tangible, and of course that speaks to the core, you know, to the movement maker. Yeah, it's gorgeous. I do want to get into, I'm going to go back a bit further. You are a graduate of Eastman, as you said, you and your wife, Joan, whom a beautiful singer, opera singer. You graduated in 1985, and then you moved to New York City, as you said briefly. You were signed to Island Records. I have 45s. I love Island Records. I mean, this is so peripheral, but you released several jazz albums and performed with your band at the Blue Note and Montreux. And believe it or not, Frankfurt Ballet in the early days, we had to stay in Montreux because we were performing in a tiny town that had a huge theater in Switzerland that was a half an hour away, but we got to stay right on the lake there.
Oh, it's so beautiful there. Oh gosh, it's gorgeous.
And went to Harry's bar.
Yeah. How fun.
So the thrill of playing on stage with a group, of artists that you know so well, that riff is, as we know, it's perhaps unexplainable. It's an ephemeral magic. Can you elaborate on this period of time and explain how it evolved into your next step onto that journey, individual visual media?
Yeah, really, this was the early years. At Eastman, I was a major in trumpet performance, classical trumpet actually, because you at that time you could not major in jazz, and also composition. I studied classical composition, and really a lot with my main mentors there were Ray Wright and Bill Dobbins, which was studio orchestra, and I remember my senior year, he had a film scoring class. So all of it was brewing. I was composing, but really, I loved being a trumpet player, and that was still, part of who I am today in a different way. But I always loved having a band. I mean, it's like family after a certain point. You know each other's personalities. Jazz as an idiom is not music. It's music that happens communally, and it happens between people. And part of the fun about being back here is some of the musicians I've made the most music with over the years happen to be here, and I'm looking forward to reconnecting with them and having a new experience, or maybe creating some new groups where I'm performing with a string quartet or who knows what, But getting back into that place of being a music maker, the experience, how can I describe it? I think that's part of what really got me back to doing concert music, because I just love being in front of an audience. There's an immediacy to that you get from a room, the energy in a room. I took it. The only kind of ironic part is I think I took it way more for granted when I was young. It was just so obvious, and I didn't see then just how special those experiences were. Of course, when you're young and starting out, there's an element of struggle, which is maybe kind of stomping you down a little bit, and there's a lot of heavy lifting to get that going. But man, the joy of just getting on the bandstand with guys and just playing music and feeding off each other and riffing off each other. I also realized quite early on that I loved the band was always an extension of my composing too. So there was really two things going on. Yes, I was up there playing, performing, but I was also writing all the music usually. So the band became an extension for my compositional voice. But my compositional aspirations are always a lot of times bigger than what a standard jazz band could maybe deliver, like instrumentally, So I would say, if you flash forward many years to like when I did House of Cards in concert, that was probably like in a way sort of the high water mark of joy for me in terms of I was conducting a full evening of orchestral music. My wife was singing occasionally this great opera stuff for Claire Underwood's character. There was a few times in that concert when I would just grab my flugelhorn and turn around and let the orchestra go on their own and just play over the orchestra. So to me, that was like a dream come true. Like, here I am in a big theater that's full usually because it was House of Cards and they all wanted to come hear the music. I was very lucky to be a part of that. But I'm getting to play jazz trumpet, but I've got like a 60 or 70 piece orchestra behind me. Amazing. So listen, that was before COVID, and that's great. But small is beautiful too. And as we sort of figure out, like, this is an artistic jam, right? Let's figure out what we're going to do next, right? I've been playing a lot of piano, just because I love playing piano. My manager and I were just talking yesterday, so I think maybe I'll do like a solo piano record sometime in the next year. But I'm thinking a lot about chamber music, partially because I haven't done that much of it. And I love chamber music. And also it's a size that's more intimate. So I'm really this is a great town for it. I mean, the community of musicians here is incredible. And there's so many great venues for all sorts of experimental music. And also I love music that that sort of freely moves between genres. And I'm not a big fan of silos, in terms of style. So I love the fact that, I can create a band, an evening of improvisation or performance that sort of draws from all the different types of music that I love,
Yeah. Wow. So, Jeff, this is a beautiful accomplishment and giving back. You have the endowment and establishment of the Beal Institute that you and Joan created for the Eastman School of Music. of which both of you, as I said before, are graduates. The Institute will promote the study of film and contemporary media music creation. Amazing. Please expand on this gift to the young creators. How and why did you come to this beautiful idea? And what were the outstanding gifts that Eastman gave you as a student?
So several. And I think that definitely inspired our love for it. I think Joan and I have a special affection for that place because, we met there. So obviously it has that sort of emotional connection, but it's also, it was and is an amazing institution. It's just, so it's a home for excellence and for passion and for learning. And part of the reason I chose to go there, it is a level of quality and excellence on like a Juilliard or something like or Curtis. But even at that time, there was a jazz program, and I saw there was a film scoring class. And so really my love of Eastman only grew as I was there, in the sense that it felt like the kind of place that was really celebrating the study of American music and music in general. Obviously, European music is a big part of any conservatory, and I love those traditions and certainly am steeped in those traditions. The inspiration to give back was really, it's interesting, I mentioned Ray Wright, my mentor, a few minutes ago, and we were back there dedicating a room to his honor. And I started getting bumped in the hallway from students like, hey, we want to learn about film music. Could you just have coffee with us? And so like this happened once, and then it happened another time. And by the time I sat down to coffee that weekend, there were like 4 or 5 students there. And I made the joke to Joan, it was like all the birds looking up in the nest saying, we want, feed us, And so I thought, wow, there's a real hunger and a need there. And so I actually started a little ad hoc online class for them. We did off and on that year. Another thing that was so cool is around that same time, students at Eastman also wanted to perform film music. Like they're playing Bruckner and Mahler and Beethoven in their regular classes, but they thought, wouldn't it be cool to start to play film music? So they actually started, and it's still going on and very successful, a student-run ensemble that plays film music. And I thought, this is so cool, because young people are always the first people to get it. They understand that film and media music is part of the conversation. It's part of the literature, right? Film is literature. Great film is great literature. And so, you've seen this happening all around the world with film scores becoming part of what orchestras are doing. I mean, the New York Philharmonic has a whole week dedicated to doing film scores. And so this is wonderful. And so I thought, okay, enough already. We should do this. And the third thing was like, with Joan and I, it's like, we just thought like, there's a person that my wife is on the board of trustees with named Marty Messenger. And he said, he's my favorite saying. He says, I want to give it away with warm hands. And I love that. It's like, there's nothing magical when you die giving money. It's like, what about if I can do it when I'm still alive? And of course, that's when the second part of your question comes back so beautifully, which is that I feel like I'm taking as much as I'm giving. Like, yes, we got to start this program. We have a wonderful 2 years master's program, and they are amazing students. I'm certainly glad, part of the reason I'm glad to be back in New York is I'm also closer to there and looking forward to visiting there more often. But for me, it's so satisfying to have a place where, along with this amazing professor we've hired, Mark Waters, who was a multi-Emmy winner from LA. But I just love what it's done for the school. I love going and meeting these students. I love seeing them grow over the 2 years. And it's just been incredibly satisfying for me to and I think it might be an age thing, but also, the life of an artist is an incredibly selfish pursuit. And so I think for me, a little less taking, a little more giving is good for the soul. It gets me out of my funk, my whatever. I just think it's a way of opening up to the universe and engaging it in a way that feels more holistic and more joyful. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I also, especially during the pandemic, I really got back to mentoring, and it is that giving it feels rounder, doesn't it? It feels
rounder is right. I love circular. That. Yeah.
You know,
And
there's
also like you, I mean, we're also at a place where we have stuff to share and you want to share it. I think it's like you want it to live on. You want to pass on the lessons that life has taught you, and hopefully guide and lead some of your legacy in these people, not as an artist, as a human being, all those things that you have, you can give back, right?
yeah, beautiful. Jeff, so let's get into your commissioned works for 2019-20. Sunrise, an evening length work for LA Master Chorale or Chorale.
Chorale, yeah.
The Paper Line Shack for the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, and a new ballet for Jackie Buglisi Dance Theatre. Other recent works are a concerto for flutist Sharon Bizali and the Minnesota Orchestra 616 concerto for guitarist Jason Vieaux, I guess is his name.
Beautiful.
Salvage for the Los Angeles Master Chorale, and the Great Circle Symphony for the New West Orchestra, and two works that we did together. These are earlier than that time, but Oasis for Smuin Ballet and Tara for the Oregon Ballet Theatre. And then recent documentary film projects, including The Biggest Little Farm, Blackfish, an Inconvenient sequel, and Athlete A. These commissions are a blend of stage and film. What you explained, this is kind of like the full meal at the table now. You get to experience both things, right? Or all kinds of things. You compose, you orchestrate, you conduct, you mix, and often perform your own scores. How utterly synergistic. I mean, it's amazing. What does film give you, and as opposed or in tandem with what stage gives you? What senses are more alive in each of those mediums? Let's start there, because there's other questions.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. My work in film has been, you don't know how long an area is going to be fascinating to you, and I think I'm surprised myself at how much I still haven't enjoyed it, and so much how much I'm still doing it, because it is really, and I think part of it is part of the clue for that is in the projects you mentioned, because film, especially documentary film, is having this amazing renaissance of creativity right now. I've tended to be the guy who does not get called, although I guess there's a part of my little ego which would like be the guy that scores the next Marvel movie, or you know what I mean? The big, let's blow a bunch of shit in the multiplex, but that's never been what they call me for. But it's good because I get to tell these amazing stories. And but you are one of the last person involved. I mean, the script is written, it's shot, it's edited. So the film it's almost like a cake that's almost made, and you are literally the icing. It's really important icing. Like, yeah. But for me, the pullback to concert music, I mean, it was, and I have to credit Joan for sort of nagging me over the years. You got to get back to that, because at a certain point, raising a son and having this career, and living with MS, which I was diagnosed with 15 years ago, it's like that soaked up all the air in the room. There was nothing left. So after our son moved out of college and we had a little extra bandwidth, I thought, I really want to do this. It's funny because I feel like I do mention MS because I felt like, because something happened to me that was so dramatic and such a life-changing new reality, that I think part of the urge, I mean, like the Salvage Men was what really the first piece of concert, was the first concert piece I wrote in the last, 10 years. Really, it was the first piece, I had done. I mean, it's a little of the first big piece. And the motivation for that was to, instead of I love telling stories, and I've told a lot of other people's stories, but it was like, well, what's my story? Well, this has been my journey, how I dealt with what's happened to me, and is it a tragedy or is it not? All those, there's a lot of existential, emotional questions I felt like I needed to process and create something. And so that was the beginning of what I feel about all the concert work, which is that it's deeply personal, whether or not it's, obviously I don't originate all the stories from that, they're not that autobiographical, But I feel like because the film is taking away, the music is it's the thing, it's the meal. I mean, if it's a ballet, it's 50% or whatever you want to call it of the experience, you know. If it's concert music, it's 100%, right? Minus, but well, it's 100% of the creation. Obviously, the performance is part of the creation as well. But I guess for me, you know, after years of, and I love collaborative work, but and I'm not like, I don't need like, I think I've loved the anonymity of being a film composer. Like, I'm not one of these people that like craves the spotlight or wants to be, I never like, being a star was like never a list of my goals, you know what I mean? But the idea of presenting work that is more from you, wholly from you, I mean HWOLLY, you know, is incredibly satisfying and so fun. And I really feel, I also feel challenged by it. I feel I'm growing and learning. I know how to write a film score. You know, some are better than others, but I know how to crack that code, you know. I'm not so sure about, like, I've certainly learned a lot about writing a dance piece, working with you and others. I've certainly a lot about writing a song cycle or a flute concerto. It's like, those are things I haven't done yet. So I am restless. I don't like to stay still. I want to be scared. I like being scared, because being scared or unsure is when you grow and when you learn. So I feel like I've been at a point in my life, and part of the location change to New York is so fun, because I feel like I'm putting my stake in the ground a little bit, like, okay, this is where I'm planting my flag for a while. Like, no, I'm more committed to this phase of my career. I can see myself, I want to see myself in that way, and I want to act in that way and create in that way.
Yeah.
There's less immediate reward, but who cares? I mean, what's reward? Some of the rewards from the live performance are, I mean, it's kind of like a drug. I mean, let's be honest. But no, the feeling of energy of real-time collaboration in a room, whether it's doing, I mean, a ballet or hearing an orchestra play your music or those kind of things, or in a world-class choral sing. I mean, they're like church for me, you know. I actually feel like that it is like church. I mean, I feel like if you agree that largely it's kind of a post-religious society, we don't worship like maybe as collective as we did maybe hundreds of years ago, but we have a human need for that darkened room where we all come together and something magical happens, you know. And that's what we miss so much right now during COVID, you know. So all those things make me feel like life is richer with the concert work added. It's scarier, it's more fascinating, it's probably ultimately most of the times more fulfilling. It's really rare that you will do a film score where I could have selfishly the kind of artistic complete expression that I could get if I'm writing a concert piece. I've been lucky in certain films to really unleash that voice. Like House of Cards is a great example where I felt like I could really dive deep into it. Pollock was another one. But I'm there to serve the film. And if that job is like getting out of the way or being a much more supporting character, well, that's the gig, and that's what I want and need to do.
Yeah. Wow. So within the same idea, and let me look at these questions. Oh yeah, so this is just you went into it so beautifully, but are there different sensorial aspects within these two? I mean, you did explain it. The sensories are much more awakened in live performance, but what are those? Are they just quieter when you're making? You know, when you're alone in that room making for film? How, you know what I mean? Like, is it just like a scale?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, it all happens in the room. I mean, whether it's writing a concert piece or film score, it all happens here, right? So I'm still by myself.
Except the stage gives you that,
exactly.
The senses that are ignited on stage are,
yes. Yeah, the full realization of it is not in this room. The full realization is when it is done on a stage or when it's in a film. So you can have a really great screening and have that, and with a lot of people, and have a little bit of that feeling. But I think the best example I could give is actually from dance, because it's so reverse of the process. Now, every choreographer is different. I mean, there are some choreographers who create the dance first, right? But in our collaborations, in many of the collaborations, I have had the pleasure of mostly creating music before you have created your dance, or it's probably bubbling in your head. So in that model, which has been pretty common with several of the choreographers, I write a score, and we go back and forth on it. We make it as great as we can, and obviously after you're in the studio, we adjust it as well, which is part of the fun part of the process. But unlike a film where I never get to hear my music change because it's the last thing on the film, I get to experience listening to my music, but seeing what you created to go with it and what the dancers are doing. And that is a sense that I've never experienced before.
Yeah.
Seeing what other artists bring to it in a completely different medium that it enables me to hear the music in a way that I did not appreciate before, to hear, feel an emotion. Because it's very hard to listen to your own stuff and objectively, and you're still impossible to be completely objective, of course, about your own work. It's and it's really rare or special or even magical when you have those moments of getting outside of your complete. This is like maybe a Zen thing, when you're completely detached from your ego or your sense of who you are, and it just washes over you, and it's very hard to do that. And so I remember some moments in the studio or in a rehearsal performance, a concert piece or a dance piece, where the live performance were so energetic, and there's so much. Listen, it's a little bit of woo-woo, but like there's something special when humans are together. There's electricity in the air, man. I don't understand it all.
No, it's not woo-woo. It's not woo-woo.
Yeah, it is real. Yeah,
it is real, and one of those realities is called proprioception. It is a real thing.
Oh, okay.
It is a sense, and it is, and when it is sensed communally, it is extremely powerful, and that goes back deep to the roots, really thousands of years ago, of those first dances around the fire. There is something in not just enjoying, but experiencing communally. That's why I always find it fascinating how group work on stage gets the audience all fired up, because there's something about unison that we can get into this, it's a unison that repeats, and we understand that, and it's deep. And you were speaking about wanting to live in this place of fear or newness, right? It's funny, the word I use is chaos, because for me, because chaos for me, again, for my brain, my movement self, everything goes back to the possibility of where the swirl where I can kind of pluck the thing out of that massive swirl of chaos. If I'm really paying attention, or like you said, dropped in, that's the word I use, which is, I think, equates to what you said of getting away from your ego. When I feel my feet on the floor, and also what really pulls me away from that terrible detachment, when you're in like a cycle and you can't see a way out or a change, I leave it. And that's how I've built my whole career now. I create really fast and I'll leave it for months. Then I come back to the company so I can be like, repetition, that I've repeated that too many times. This needs to be reduced. This needs to be amplified. And those are some tricks I've learned over the years. But you're right, chaos and getting comfortable with that and letting that come in again, right? And
yes.
A move, what do they say? I always forget the 4 big things that you shouldn't change all at once. Well, I mean, but changing one of those things, or 2, because of the pandemic, is a huge shift for all of us artists, everybody. But you changed your geographical location, and that does give a different energy, because it's like the feelers are out again. There's a lot of discovery,
Totally.
So Jeff, your career is vast, and it was difficult to choose what to highlight in today's conversations. And I love the threads we've gone into. This struck a note. Your performing, conducting, and composing worlds converged in 2016 when you led the National Symphony Orchestra at the Kennedy Center in the premiere of House of Cards, which you mentioned. There were further performances in Miami, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Jerusalem. This symphonic work was recorded by BIS Records on a double SACD, House of Cards Symphony, which included your flute and guitar concerti. What a significant reimagining of self, of art within this iteration of what was, right? You explained it already and how that took you emotionally. Did this shift your ideas in creating and manifesting? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because I learned kind of not, I think in my 30s when I was doing my first silent film score for the General, that my grandmother, Irene, was a pianist for silent movies. And she was a great improviser. I mean, she gave me some of my first Miles Davis vinyls, which I still have. I mean, that was like, okay, the DNA is in there somewhere. You know, I got crazy from Grandma Irene, which is great. God, thank God for that.
Yeah.
But I remember the experience of when I first started conducting, when I first started doing these live to picture concerts, whether it was a silent film score like Sunrise was, House of Cards in concert was an all the picture show. I actually created those visual montages. We weren't just like scoring an episode. I actually created montages, which, you know, sometimes the characters speak, sometimes they don't. So it was like creating a new multimedia type of thing. We did Boston live with the Boston Pops Esplanade Orchestra, and I've done so this whole idea of conducting,
Yeah.
and leading an orchestra is thrilling to me. And it's something I've done all my career, okay, and getting a little better and better over time, you know, learning the process. But I realized, I think the first time I realized how powerful it was when I recorded a couple scores over in Prague in the Czech Republic. And some of the orchestra speaks English, many of them don't. But I remember that feeling, and I've always conducted my scores. I remember that feeling of being in the room and just conducting them. And I felt so at ease and so happy and so relaxed because I realized 90% of what they need to know about how the music should sound and be shaped is all in my arms. It's all here, you know. And I love conducting. I love these concerts that are film music concerts because they are something special for an audience that kind of connects all these different dots for me personally as an artist. They're also incredibly welcoming because there's a whole swath of the population which is like, oh, I'm not going to go in a concert hall and hear an orchestra, you know, but it's like, hey, you want to go see a movie? It's less scary, you know, and that's good, you know, because film, like I said, film is literature. So I would say the explosion, and that certainly wasn't my doing. I mean, I was just sort of, we were all seeing it happen, but this explosion of the screen in the concert hall has been wonderful because it's taken a sort of a more passive medium and made it much more interactive, especially with live music, you know, and it's amazing. Like you could even go see a movie that you've seen before, even if it's, you know, like John Williams, Harry Potter or the Star Wars or whatever, you know, but you hear that music live, wow, it's a totally different experience. And it's the visceral thing. Air is moving, people are playing. LA Opera did a wonderful one at the Ace Hotel of Bernard Herrmann's score to Vertigo. And it was incredible. Or no, it was Psycho. I'm sorry, it was Psycho. And it was great. I mean, it was such a great score. And I've seen the movie and heard the score, but like, I never heard this. Like, I heard the score, like, oh, that was it. It was being done in the room. So that kind of convergence is fun for me. It's, I guess there's a little bit of it that's, what do I want to say? It's, again, it's not wanting to repeat. Like, I could, I guess, make more money or have more credits if I just stayed here and wrote film scores. But invariably, I'm having fun creating these events. We certainly want to go back to Boston and do that a few times. I actually just did a new commission, which I'm really excited about. This came in last March during the pandemic, sort of early on. And I got a commission to do a whole new score for the wonderful German expressionist films Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Oh,
And a brilliant, amazing movie, right?
oh
Yeah.
yes.
So that'll be done in Berlin and many other cities in Germany, and hopefully in the fall. So I'll be out there for that. So, but
Oh,
these are
what a great project. I mean, the whole idea of German expressionism, like mixing all of
oh
that color, right? Of German
yeah,
expressionist painting, that color
oh
in and of itself, that is music, right?
yeah, and oh
Oh,
yeah, and that film is and Sunrises too, just visually stunning. It was the same period of F.W. Murnau, and this was another filmmaker. Wow, just
oh,
the storytelling, and it really was sort of the first suspense psychological horror film. I mean, it's got so much in it thematically, and the fun thing about these works is that you take something very old, over 100 years old, right? But I try to write a score to it that makes it work for 2021 eyes and ears, which music is so powerful in that way. You can take a film that, yeah, they're slower paced, and it's not, you don't have the CGI, but if you really look at what's there and how the great ones, and just look how amazing they are, giving those a new life with a musical identity is so fun.
congratulations.
Thanks.
That sounds like so much fun. So, wow. Um, so, let's see, do particular instant, yeah, along the lines, so conducting, yes, and that is kind of like, I had this whole question about what does the movement feel like when you're conducting in your body, how is that, because my imagination is that it is being, is coming out of you with these gestures, and how you're, so there is a choreography there, but it is definitely, I wouldn't say improvic, but it is of the moment, because you are taking care also of a huge group of people, right?
Yeah.
And I'm taking care of in the way that you're directing, right? So you need to, so I'm curious about how the movement feels in your body, and if particular instruments, where they might hit you in your body.
Hmm. Well, it's funny because I think every artist has a few sort of eureka moments in their life, and when they sort of knew what they wanted to do. And I remember sitting in the trumpet section of the Oakland Youth Symphony in San Francisco Bay Area, and we had a great adventuresome conductor, Robert Hughes, and we were doing Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, which I'm sure you know very well. And I remember, I might have heard the music, but I remember sitting inside the orchestra and hearing the sound of that orchestration, which is, I mean, the piece is brilliant, but the orchestration is brilliant. And there is no, I often, this was it. Like, he let me a score, I started studying it, and it's like, I was just like, oh, I got to do this. And I realized the light bulb that went off is like, I want to write music that tells stories, because it's a ballet, obviously, it's a story, it's a wonderful narrative. But I also want to write, I love the orchestra. I love it. And so the reason I was thinking about that story was, the first thing that hits you when you're conducting is just what a privileged place you have sonically to experience the sound, because you are literally at these focal point. I mean, everything in an orchestra is facing, because it's necessary for synchronization. Everything is visually oriented toward your spot. But it's also a really great place, because part of what you do as a conductor is properly balance the music so that by the time it leaves the stage, it sounds right. Well, you're geographically at that perfect spot, because all the sound, whether it's coming from the back or the front, in terms of its relative volume, its timing, which is also very important, you're trying to synchronize the sound so that it's together by the time it hits your ears, so that it'll go out together to the audience. That sound is incredible. Now, I'm a trumpet player, so I know what a trumpet sounds like, but for me, like, strings are my thing. I love strings. I think it is the way the instruments resonate, because they're these vibrating bodies. I mean, they're wood, but strings are fascinating and it really depends on the concert hall. And so I love that feeling of being in a beautiful room with an amazing orchestra, where the orchestra is, of course, great, but the acoustics enhance the string sound so that there's this amazing sort of, I often feel I think that I often describe it, it's like a flock of birds who just instinctively know how to fly together. Like you conduct a great string section and it's like a flock of birds, like you have to do so little. And just the way that they just sort of immediately come together. The other thing that I think that's a conducting memory and a lesson I learned was realizing that it's not a one-way process. Yes, you are leading, but you also are listening. And I remember when there was a slow movement in the House of Cards symphony when we were doing it in the Kennedy Center, where I realized I was moved. I realized I could almost pretty much stop, and they knew exactly what to do. And the less I did, the better it got. Do you know what I mean? So that was also fun, like kind of the Zen lesson of like how much do they need. It's also not just the arms, it's the face, it's the breath. It's like, and I've had some, Lucas Richmond was a great conducting teacher for me. He still leads this amazing workshop for BMI composers gives us like a real master. It was a master class in what a conductor does. And so this is so fun for me, Helen. I'm glad that you mentioned it because, this is something that I'm still very much a student of and learning. And so, for me, the thrill of having something that I still feel like, oh yeah, I can get way better at this is really, really fun for me. It's just fun because and it's an experiential learning. You can only learn it better by doing it. You got to get your butt in front of an orchestra. So, a part of when I realized how much I loved it, and it's still in the present tense, whenever I have an opportunity to somebody calls me and say, hey, could you come, wave your arms? I said, yeah, I'm there. What time?
It's funny. Something really hit me. You said, that Zen where you doing less helps. And the thing that my brain immediately thought of is it went right back to improv and jazz and the note not played.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. The space, the silence, the pause.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so important. They're so important.
I think film is time in choreography as well.
I know. I remember you had this beautiful moment. I think it was an Oasis where people were just standing still, and it was at this huge climax. And I think it was the first movement of Oasis, and they just face you, and there's one. It's the solo dancer. He comes forward with Mark or whatever his name. He comes forward. He just stands still, and there's movement behind it, but he's just still. And it was so powerful.
Yeah.
And I think film has taught me a lot about that because film is a dance with all this other stuff, especially actors. And part of scoring film well is knowing when to get the heck out of the way and leaving that space and that silence. Same thing with jazz, though. Leaving space is so important for the audience. It's important for the audience because it's like speech. You need punctuation. So it's that moment where the audience has time to absorb. And this is funny because I'm realizing I'm probably way too fast and dense talker. So that's maybe another skill I can work on. But in music, the idea of leaving space and meeting out your ideas in a way that they can land and then just sit there while the audience waits for them to land is so important. They mean more.
Yeah, exactly. I always tell the adage of there were two amazing actors that I was working with early on in New York on stage. It was a rehearsal, and one actor was going for broke. I mean, so energetic, such an amazing output, and he's so dropped in his body. And the other actor simply walked from downstage to from upstage to downstage. The microphone was downstage. He walked it was deliberate, but it was slow. And you couldn't take your eyes off him. And there was an amazing performance happening just, with enough space so you could see both, but you couldn't take your eyes off that person walking downstage and wrapping his hand around the mic stand. And I learned so much in that moment. I thought, ooh, okay.
Well, you know what I think that reminds me of is a very important concept, which I've been thinking a lot about the last 5-6 years, which is the role of the audience member in finishing the work. Yes. as a performer or a creator, we often think that we have to give them everything. I remember years ago when I was working with Ed Harris, he said it another way. He said, we want the audience to work a little bit.
I
And I
say the
love
same
that. It's the,
thing. Jeff, I say
yeah,
the same thing. Like, I refuse
right.
spoon feed.
Yeah,
Theater
yeah.
is experiential. If we give them all the answers,
They're not engaged. They're not leaning in, right?
they're
Part of,
not
and it's the
leaning
way
in.
the way our brains work is our brains are wired for story. So we are wanting to create a story out of what we're seeing. So giving enough so that it's intriguing, but holding enough back so that the listener can enter the work is so important, you know. Yeah.
Agreed, totally agreed. Well, we have come to the part of the interview where it's these, I ask these same questions of everybody. I've changed one word for you because we're in music. In supporting and building a more equitable music community, what are some specific daily practices that you could be more active in? I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I think, you know, I think about opportunity and I think about mentoring, you know. There it's so ironic that, like, for my world is a great example, you know, there's no special requirement in being a composer or a film composer that you're a white male, you know, although yet my business especially has been dominated by that. So I have a number of friendships with people who I mentor and champion, who I believe in, and I'm friends with them first because I think they're really talented. But I enjoy being a part of their lives and helping them. I also feel like the program at Eastman is a venue for that, because it's not designed with a mandate for this, but just by nature of the world being what it is, it's a chance to allow more people from different places of the world, different genders, to engage. And then I think finally, I was mentioning to you before we started recording, but, you know, also do something concrete. You know, at a certain point, I feel a little bit like the lip service is exhausting and not really as authentic as doing something that's tangible. And during this move, Joan and I had to decide. This move was it really was motivated. The prime mover of this was Joan's mom, who was by herself in Connecticut, you know, and we wanted to be, Joan felt a pull to be closer and be a good daughter-in-law and be a good son-in-law and help take care of a family member, which is a real basic human thing. But by moving here, you know, our home / studio in LA was vacant, and we were like, well, what are we going to do with this, you know? And I had an idea, but I was a little scared to mention to Joan, but then she came to me with the idea. So somebody should be living there. It's like, yeah, I know. And it's like, well, we could just sell it. Well, I don't want to just, but it's a great studio, and it's still like kind of so basically I've turned it into the first year of a pilot experiment of basically giving residency to 4 of our graduates from Eastman, as a way of living in LA for a year to establish themselves. And I'm really excited by this. It feels like it's very tangible, because it's a way to get, you know, LA is not an easy town it's a crazy expensive housing market. We're just coming out of a pandemic. There's also, as much as I think the Eastman is amazing, we do have a geographical disconnect from the one city where, if you really want to do that specific thing, you really should be. And I'm very happy about the way it's going, but I'm also happy about the effect this decision had on their lives. Was that all 4 of these people had the idea of trying out LA, but none of them were ready to do it. And so I feel very happy that this opportunity has provided that access to them. So, you know, I think it's just, you know, bit by bit, little gesture by little gesture. You know, it's funny, you know, I'll tell I had an interesting moment. I saw Questlove, he did this wonderful film called The Summer of Soul. Have you seen this yet?
Not yet.
Amazing. It's a documentary about the New York Music Festival. And it was basically, they call it like the Black Woodstock, okay? It happened up here in Harlem. It was same summer as Woodstock. Nobody really wrote about it because, you know, Woodstock happened, but it was all filmed. And he made this amazing documentary about it. So it's a wonderful concert film. I mean, just amazing artist after artist. But, you know, I grew up in the 70s, and towards the end of the film, Sly and the Family Stone gets on stage. And up to then, it's been like, first of all, I love that band. I love him. And they get on stage, and like the drummer is a white guy, and the saxophonist is a white guy, and they're all just playing music together. And I remember that feeling, and maybe it's a slightly naive lens, but back to the 70s, San Francisco was a pretty kumbaya, like open. It was an open feeling of acceptance and freedom to move between these places. And I thought that is the best metaphor for the way I want any artist to feel about doing whatever they want to do, and us as artists welcome them. And listen, this cuts both ways, because, you know, there's no rule you have to be Black to play jazz. I think there's no rule you have to be white and male to write a film score or choreograph a ballet. So I just think part of what has happened socially, it extends beyond the art world. Okay, so without getting political, because this is not a political forum, but it is an artistic forum. So I think as artists, the more we can be the people that break down whatever wall was there before, create an opportunity for somebody that thought, well, gosh, I'd really love to do that, but I can't because I'm this color or I'm this gender or whatever. Like, let's just get over that. Like, whatever, let's just stop that, you know? And this is hard. This is hard for me to talk about because, listen, it's been a wake-up year for me too, Helen. Like, listen, I have come to grips with a new understanding of privilege that I was, you know, blissfully kind of blind to for a long part of my adult life. Yeah. And I'm starting to understand better. Yes, I've worked hard, but I've also been incredibly lucky, and I've also been in the right sort of package that was easy for people to say yes to. So that is something that is I'm really glad that's happening. I'm really glad society is moving that way. I'm really proud of you as a choreographer. I know your world is not often, you know, it's changing a lot, but I know you've done a lot of work mentoring and championing new voices in choreography. So, you know, it's an adventure, and we're in the upheaval years, but I see a future that's much brighter.
I believe the upheaval years, I'm really excited about the upheaval years. I'm really happy to live in this time and being able to.
I love that about tell me why. That's great. Tell me.
No, it's because I'm at the place now where I feel like I can contribute and make a difference, like you, with creating this endowment for Eastman, like you really giving your home to 4 students. This is active. And I agree with you with the lip service. Like, I feel like the pandemic gave me a chance, and I took it to be active in what I truly believe in. And I am committed, and I am like you. I'm doing this with the feeling of width and community and agency within the community, and knowing, like this female choreographers roundtable that I created. We had our inaugural session on April 8th. The roundtables on purpose, there is enough space. It's that circle again, that energy. So there's enough space for everyone, but we must make the space. And I feel like that is happening now on multiple levels. I mean, just listening to you just waking up and saying, whoa, this implicit, like using your words, it's implicit place of privilege. It's you know, and you're like, whoa, oh my gosh, just because of, you know, what the package I was born into. You know, and I've experienced the same thing. As a woman, as a leader in the ballet world, there's been some, you know, bias, but I'm staying the course because, like you, the example speaks volumes. If a young person can see a person that looks like themselves, they know it's possible. And you are affording that. You are. And that is active. That is contribution. That is community. That is that giving back. That's life. That's how I believe life can be, like you, right? That is what we do for our young. That is how we give forward. So my hat is really off to you and everything you're doing there. I hear you in what you said. You know, I do have 2 more questions. It's like the never
end. Let's go. I'm having a blast. Keep going.
These are spontaneous, so they're going to speak to your improvic heart. Can you share one more? You've shared so much. Impactful or favorite memory from your creative life, something that just comes to you now.
Oh, wow. I guess it was, I was a kid playing trumpets, just learning how to play jazz. And I was at a jazz band camp in junior high, and Joe Henderson, amazing, brilliant jazz saxophone player, was giving a master class in improvisation. And he invited somebody to come up on stage and play with him. And I don't know what possessed me at the time, Helen, to say, "Oh, do it." And it was like I was so full of spit and vinegar, you know, but it's almost like the wisdom of children. I think part of what we try to do as artists is it's easier you can accumulate all the trappings and all the baggage and all the weight of adulthood. And so for me, I guess the reason that popped into my head was the childlike joy and lack of self kind of consciousness in a way that was part of that, which I like that young person, you know. He reminds me of something pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the critic wasn't there yet, right?
Yeah, no, it was just like, hey, I think I can do this, you know. Let's see what's the worst that can happen.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And what is one more insight that you can share? Perhaps it might be your core insight about living a creative life.
I would say, you know, be curious because, and it's funny, I've been doing a lot of work with Brian Greene, the physicist, and he wrote this beautiful, beautiful new book, which I would recommend anybody read, even if you're not a science geek. It's called Until the End of the Time, and it's all about the far distant future, but it's also a very philosophical book. And what it reminded me of, that a scientist, a true scientist, is excited because every discovery tells them what they don't know next. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I feel like manifesting curiosity is so useful in wherever you are, because if you are not, you've already prejudged what the universe is. And so many times in my life and an artist's life, it's the thing that you didn't see coming, the thing that you didn't expect, the thing that you didn't know, that's the most fascinating and it ultimately revelatory. Like the singers down in the scary place, you know. It's like, oh, maybe it's not as scary. We're gonna have to rechristen this place. It's the magical place where choral singing happens. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Totally, like, so with you in your journey of art. Like it so much resonates, and it will resonate with our watchers and our listeners. Jeff, it's been an absolutely generous and, to use your word, revelatory. It's been a wonderful conversation with you. You're such a generous person and artist, as is Joan, and 2 amazing people, in an active pursuit to give back and to stay curious and to be in it, yes, in the mosh pit. And I thank you so much for this interview. I want to direct viewers to a place where they might find out more about you, or perhaps Eastman. Where could they find you? Where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, jeffbeal.com is my website, and Jeff Beal Music, at Jeff Beal Music is socials, and you can find most everything you need there. Yeah.
Great. Beautiful. And there will be included a short bio in the description page that will come with this video. Creative Vitality Jam sessions will take a break for a while, but you can watch 83 sessions on our YouTube channel if you are yearning to hear from amazing artists, including Jeff. I want to thank Gracie Spina, my amazing intern, for all of these sessions. Thank you so much, dear. I want to thank the dance world, and I want to thank all artists like you, Jeff. You give so much, and I'm so appreciative to have worked with you on our two pieces, and hopefully there's more to come. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and Jeff, thank you so much. I hope to see you soon in New York.
Thank you, Helen. You too.
Bye.
Bye.